Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. The US and China have reached a preliminary consensus in their trade negotiations. When it comes to China, US officials can be described as wanting to provoke but also being afraid to play too hard. This has led to a phenomenon where the US itself doesn't make the first move but keeps urging its allies, "You go first, I'll definitely follow." Meanwhile, the allies just look at each other, waiting to see who will act. US Treasury Secretary Bensent, in a joint interview with Reuters and Bloomberg, bluntly told the EU, "You go first, I'll follow you." Bensent said that European countries need to play a greater role in cutting off Russia's oil revenues and ending the Russia-Ukraine conflict. He also made it clear that unless Europe imposes high tariffs on China and India, the Trump administration will not impose additional tariffs on Chinese goods to stop China from buying Russian oil. When asked about the recent move in early August to impose an additional 25% tariff on Indian imports, bringing the total tariff rate to 50%, when asked whether the United States would impose tariffs on Chinese goods related to Russian oil, Bessent replied, "We hope European countries will do their part now. Without their help, our actions will not move forward." Trump also criticized some European countries in the joint interview for buying Russian oil, while others bought Russian crude at a discount and refined it in India. He claimed that these countries were financing conflicts in their own backyards, implying that the battlefield is in Europe and you should handle it yourselves. Mainland political commentary and analysis pointed out that this Sino-US struggle is different from the Cold War. During the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union competed for hegemony. After the small countries around them took advantage of one side, they would go to the other side to reap the benefits. Both sides enjoyed themselves to the fullest. Small and medium-sized countries reaped the benefits from both sides. This was the survival logic at the time. After the US and China started this round of fighting, other countries reverted to the Cold War logic, thinking they could take advantage of the US, then China, and then the US. But the reality is that the overall situation has changed this time. The current Sino-US game is obviously more consuming for the US than during the Cold War, and its own foundation is also much worse, especially the trade war launched after Trump returned to the White House. They quickly discovered that China is a tough nut to crack, and targeting China doesn't really work. It's actually easier and more rewarding to deal with allies. As a result, Europe's tragedy began. They originally thought the Cold War dividends had returned, but instead they were forced into a corner by the United States and became someone else's cannon fodder. This is exactly what Bessent said. "Europe, you make the first move against China and India, and only then will the US follow." But would anyone with a clear mind really believe that the US would actually follow through? The conclusion is that Europe originally wanted to use the same strategy as during the Cold War, reaping benefits from both China and the US and living in peace for generations. But they didn't expect that this time the game is different from the Cold War. Whoever sides with the US is the one who gets hurt. Another example is ASEAN's Philippines. Taking advantage of Trump's presidency, they kept provoking China in the South China Sea. As a result, last week, China made a big move at Scarborough Shoal. The State Council approved the establishment of a new national-level nature reserve at Scarborough Shoal. According to the relevant regulations, the area, scope, and functional zoning of the Scarborough Shoal National Nature Reserve will be announced. On the surface, this means that there will be no land reclamation or construction of military bases in this area. However, the actual impact is far-reaching. It asserts China's sovereignty, and through a combination of ecological protection, sovereignty maintenance, legal measures, and international relations, uses non-military means and rule-based moral power to skillfully resolve disputes and consolidate China's strategic position. The Philippines has always played the victim in front of the West, claiming that China bullies it because it is weak. China tells the West its actions are to protect the marine environment, claiming the moral high ground. It also warns foreign countries to keep ships away from its coral reefs or face legal action. After the Philippines protested, the US State Department backed them, stating it doesn't recognize the protected area designated by China. Feeling supported, the Philippines took action on September 16th. Jin Ru, spokesperson for the China Coast Guard, stated, "On September 16th, the Philippines organized more than a dozen government vessels to illegally intrude into China's Scarborough Shoal territorial waters. Despite repeated warnings and dissuasion from China, the Chinese Coast Guard exercised legal control over the Philippine vessels and maintained close contact with them. The spokesperson also stated that during this period, the Philippine government vessel number 3014 engaged in dangerous maneuvers and deliberately rammed a Chinese Coast Guard vessel carrying out normal law enforcement, endangering the safety of Chinese vessels and personnel. The Chinese Coast Guard implemented legal control measures and the on-site operations were conducted in a professional and legitimate manner. In June, China reiterated that Scarborough Shoal is China's inherent territory and that the Philippines' actions seriously infringe upon China's sovereignty and violate Chinese laws and relevant provisions of international law. China urges the Philippines to immediately cease its infringing actions. China's Coast Guard will conduct rights protection and law enforcement activities in the waters of Scarborough Shoal in accordance with the law and firmly safeguard China's territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests. According to a video released by CCTV's Yuyuan Talk, the Filipino personnel waved the white flag and begged for mercy shortly after being sprayed by Chinese Coast Guard water cannons. In March last year, when the Philippines attempted to illegally deliver construction materials to a grounded warship at Renai Reef, they were also blocked by Chinese Coast Guard water cannons and waved a white flag at that time as well. During a regular press conference, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian stated that the facts once again prove that the Philippine side's deliberate maritime infringements and provocations are the root cause of the escalating tensions. The Philippines listened to the United States, stirring up trouble in the South China Sea, but when things go wrong, they raise the white flag. All I can say is that the China Coast Guard has already been very restrained. Just look at how the United States deals with Venezuela. Any ship that leaves port is sunk by the military without trial if there's even a suspicion of drug trafficking. Marcos Jr. should reflect on this. If he keeps going down this path and ends up in direct conflict with China, will the US really send troops to help him? Politicians in the EU and the Philippines should learn from each other. The US tells the EU to go first, promising to follow up itself. But then, when it comes to the Philippines, they obediently go first. So did the US actually follow through? The Philippines can also look at the EU's experience. Every time you give in to the US, they'll keep pushing you to hand over even more resources. But if you want to get any real benefits from the US, forget about it. Using anti-China rhetoric to curry favor, to win Trump's favor, not just the EU and the Philippines, but also one of America's tech giants. Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Meta, once said that if Trump returned to the White House, he might end up in jail. But after some serious bootlicking, he has now become a VIP guest at the White House. According to a Financial Times report on September 16th, for some time, although Meta has continuously tried to align itself with the Trump administration's tough stance on China, a top Chinese hardware manufacturer is currently holding sway over Meta. Gore-Tex, based in Shandong, is strengthening its control over Meta's AI glasses supply chain through a series of deals, thereby expanding its influence in the smart glasses industry and within Meta's own new research and supply chain. Gore-Tex deals include acquiring 100% equity in Shanghai Olitech, which is the combined entity of Ningbo Xinyu Aolai Technology Company Limited's holdings in Xinyu Aolai Olitech Optics, Shanghai Company Limited, and Xinyu Aolai Olitech Optoelectronics Information Technology, Shanghai Company Limited. Shanghai Olitech produces micro-optical devices for smart glasses. In addition, Gore-Tex also assisted in financing the acquisition of Meta's UK optical supplier Plexi. The report states that these moves come as Meta is attempting to diversify and shift its hardware supply chain out of China. According to informed sources, Meta has already started partial production of its Quest VR headsets in Vietnam this year, but Gore-Tex remains one of Meta's main hardware partners in Vietnam. At the same time, Gore-Tex is also manufacturing Meta's upcoming new generation of smart glasses, which are expected to launch this week. According to a person familiar with the matter, Meta has no choice but to work with Gore-Tex because they are the most stable and reliable supplier of key components. The report states that Gore-Tex not only manufactures Meta's Quest virtual reality headsets and the popular co-branded Ray-Ban smart glasses, but also supplies some components. In addition, Meta also sources parts from other suppliers in regions such as Japan and the United States. Recently, Zuckerberg has begun positioning himself as a so-called AI leader, with moves including the development of lighter wearable devices powered by AI models. Meta has also worked with the US government to promote the modernization of military technology. According to the Financial Times, Meta's continued reliance on Gertech for its next-generation wearable devices is in line with the stark contrast to Zuckerberg's tough stance toward China. According to informed sources, Zuckerberg has repeatedly emphasized to President Trump this year the importance of the US defeating China in the field of AI. On one hand, Zuckerberg openly accuses China of stealing American technology, but at the same time, he has been lobbying to expand business in China, aiming to bring Meta's virtual reality headsets into this vast new market. However, potential Chinese partners are concerned that Zuckerberg's past remarks about China may pose challenges for cooperation. The Wall Street Journal is very skeptical about this move by Meta, believing that even if Meta manages to enter the Chinese market, its virtual reality devices will still face fierce competition from companies like ByteDance, Apple, and Sony. Moreover, users' attitudes toward Meta's devices have always been lukewarm. In December 2022, the Wall Street Journal also published a lengthy article describing the contradictory and awkward situation that Zuckerberg is facing. The article explained that, although Zuckerberg has long been stirring up fear in American political circles, trying to use American nationalism to suppress his main competitor, TikTok, his company Meta still relies on Chinese factories when developing its virtual reality and metaverse businesses to manufacture almost all related electronic products. As a result, Zuckerberg, who relies on anti-China rhetoric and competes in the Chinese market, has to face the reality that his products are made in China. He is stuck in the predicament of having his products labeled "Made in China." Even some of his company's executives feel that if this continues, it will come across as hypocritical. In conclusion, Zuckerberg, like the EU, has fallen into a misunderstanding about this round of US-China competition, thinking he could benefit from both sides, but in the end, he finds himself belonging to neither.